Hey, my name is Blake. I'm 28 and I live in the suburbs of Milwaukee. I work as a systems technician for a small logistics company. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady. I fix servers, troubleshoot networks, and take calls at 2 in the morning when everything suddenly dies and no one knows why. Most nights I come home, heat up whatever's left in the fridge, and listen to old records. My life is quiet, predictable. And for the most part, that's exactly how I like it. Except for one person who makes the quiet feel less empty. Her name is Hannah Bennett. We've been best friends for almost 6 years. We met in a bookstore cafe on a rainy Tuesday. I had just claimed the last available power outlet for my laptop when she walked over, plugged her charger in without asking, and looked up at me with zero remorse. "Sorry," she said, completely calm. I saw it first emotionally. I should have been annoyed. Instead, I bought her a coffee. That was the beginning. Since then, Hannah has been the person I call when something good happens, when something terrible happens, or when I just don't want to eat dinner alone. She knows how I take my coffee, knows I hate horror movies but will watch them if she insists, and knows that when I go quiet for too long, I'm not angry. I'm sad. And I know her in the small ways that matter. When she's annoyed, she tucks her hair behind her ear too hard. When she lies, she over-explains. When she's hurting, she smiles too much. And that night at the engagement party, she smiled way too much. It started with a text from her at 5:30 in the evening. "Save me from a night of people asking when it's my turn to get married. Wear something nice," I replied. "Am I your best friend or your emotional support animal?" She answered immediately, "Both. Don't be late." So at 7 o'clock, I picked her up. She came out wearing a deep blue dress that hugged her waist and fell just past her knees. Her hair was curled softly and she wore small gold hoops that caught the porch light. She looked beautiful in the kind of way that made me glance at the road a little too quickly because I didn't want her to catch me staring. The party was at Rachel's parents' house on the north side of town. Warm lights, white flowers, the low hum of polite conversation and clinking champagne glasses. Hannah stayed close to me the whole time, occasionally leaning in to whisper sarcastic comments about the speeches that were just a little too long. I laughed under my breath more than once. Then Jason walked in. I had heard the name twice before. Both times Hannah had mentioned him like he was nobody important, but her voice had gone strangely flat, like she was working too hard to sound casual. That should have told me everything. Jason was tall, wearing a tailored navy suit and a watch that probably cost more than my car. He moved like someone who expected people to turn and look. And he wasn't alone. A woman in a silver dress had her arm linked through his, smiling like she belonged there. Hannah saw them. Her smile faltered for half a second. Then she lifted her glass, took a sip, and kept smiling. That was the part that hurt. Jason made his way over, all easy charm and expensive cologne. He congratulated Rachel, introduced his date like it was the most natural thing in the world. And when his eyes landed on Hannah, he smiled like nothing had ever happened between them. Like he hadn't deliberately shown up with someone new at the exact party he knew she would attend. Hannah raised her glass again. And drank. Then another. Then another. I didn't judge her. I just stayed half a step closer than usual, close enough that if she lost her balance, no one but me would notice. By 11 o'clock, she was still laughing, still talking, still insisting she was completely fine. But I knew better. I leaned down and spoke quietly near her ear. "Hannah, you want to go home?" She looked across the room at Jason, then let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Am I winning yet?" I frowned. "There's no contest." She turned the stem of her glass between her fingers, eyes still fixed on the other side of the room. "There's always a contest, Blake." I didn't have an answer for that. I drove her home. She kicked off her heels the second we got in the car. One shoe landed on the passenger floor, the other somehow ended up near the brake pedal. Her head rested against the window, eyes half closed, brows occasionally furrowing like she was still angry at herself for caring. When I pulled up in front of her parents' house, the porch light came on almost immediately. Diane Bennett opened the door. She took one look at her daughter, leaning most of her weight against me, and sighed the sigh of a mother who had seen this coming from 3 miles away. She stepped down onto the walkway, slipped an arm around Hannah's waist, and murmured, "Oh, my sweet, stupid girl." Then her eyes moved to me. Her voice dropped, quiet but deliberate, like she had just decided to say something she had been holding on to for a long time. "Blake," she whispered, "the girl only talks about you." I froze. It wasn't dramatic. No music swelled. No one gasped. But something inside my chest shifted, like a picture frame that had been hanging crooked for years and someone had finally straightened it. Hannah mumbled something incoherent, half asleep against my shoulder. Diane looked at me for another long second, her expression soft but knowing. "Maybe I shouldn't have said that," she added gently. I swallowed. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "It's okay, I just didn't know what to do with it." Diane glanced at her daughter, then back at me. Her tone shifted, practical now. "Help me get her upstairs, will you?" I nodded. But as I stood there on the porch, Hannah's weight warm against my side and Diane's words still ringing in my ears, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing was going to feel the same after tonight. I helped Diane get Hannah upstairs. The Bennett house wasn't unfamiliar. I'd been here more times than I could count. Birthdays, family dinners, the night Hannah had the flu and I brought soup, the Saturday I helped her dad fix the garage shelves. But tonight the house felt different. The framed photos on the wall, the faint smell of ginger tea from the kitchen, the way the wooden stairs creaked under our feet. Everything was the same, yet Diane's words kept looping in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. "The girl only talks about you." Hannah's bedroom was at the end of the hall. Warm yellow lamplight, white sheets slightly rumpled, a stack of half-read books on the nightstand. I eased her down onto the edge of the bed. She blinked at me slowly, like she was trying to make sure I was real. "Blake?" she murmured. I crouched in front of her. "Yeah, I'm here." Her fingers found my wrist and closed around it. Not tight, just enough to keep me from standing up. Her lips curved into a tired, crooked smile. "Thanks for tonight." I smiled back, but it felt thin. Her eyes were glassy from the alcohol, and underneath that, something heavier. Diane disappeared to get water and painkillers, leaving us alone. Hannah didn't let go of my wrist. I stayed crouched there, watching her face. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. No hesitation, no fake smile, no, "I'm fine," like she always said. Just a slow shake of her head. Something in my throat tightened. "Jason's an asshole," I said. A weak laugh slipped out of her. She looked at me through heavy lashes and said, "You don't like him." "I'm trying to be polite." She stared down at her hand still wrapped around my wrist. Her voice dropped lower. "He brought her on purpose." "I know." She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she whispered, "I hate that I still care." I covered her hand with mine. "Caring doesn't make you weak." She shook her head again, eyes suddenly glassy in a different way. "Yes, it does. It makes me feel like a backup plan. Like if he ever gets bored, he can just come back and I'll still be standing there." I squeezed her hand gently, voice firmer now. "You've never been anyone's backup plan." She lifted her eyes to mine. They were wet, unfocused from the wine, but painfully honest. The kind of honest that only comes out when the walls are down. "You always say the right thing," she breathed. I shook my head. "No, I just say the obvious faster than most people." She laughed softly, then the laugh died. After a moment, she looked at me again and asked, "Do you know what the worst part is?" I had the feeling I was about to hear something I would never forget. My voice came out rough. "What?" Her fingers tightened around my wrist. "I keep comparing him to you." I went completely still. She kept going, like if she stopped now, she'd lose the courage. Not on purpose at first. Just stupid little things. The way he texts. The way he actually listens when I talk. The way he laughs when someone else gets embarrassed. The way he makes me feel unsafe. She looked up at me, eyes shining. "No one's been right since you, Blake." I thought I misheard her. Not because the words were unclear, because they were too clear. "No one's been right since you." I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, Diane came back with a glass of water and 2 pills. She stopped in the doorway, took one look at Hannah's face, then at me. And I knew she realized she had just walked in on something fragile. She crossed the room, handed the pills to her daughter, and spoke softly. Hannah, take these, sweetheart. Hannah obeyed without argument, proof of how drunk she really was. Normally, she could debate an aspirin for 10 minutes. Diane pulled the blanket back and helped her lie down. I stood up slowly because if I stayed this close any longer, I was going to say something I didn't want to say while she was still too drunk to hold on to it. I glanced at Diane. I should go. Hannah's eyes opened. She looked at me, voice barely above a whisper. Don't. One word. It hit me straight in the chest. Diane looked between us, then spoke in that calm, steady way only mothers seem to master. Blake, come downstairs and have some tea with me. I don't think she should be alone tonight. I nodded. Hannah had already closed her eyes again, but her fingers were still gripping the edge of the blanket like she was holding onto something she wasn't ready to let go. I followed Diane down to the kitchen. The clock on the wall read almost 1 in the morning. The rain outside had softened to a light drizzle. The kitchen was warm and familiar, but tonight I felt like I was sitting in front of a door that, once opened, I could never close again. Diane set a mug of tea in front of me and sat down across the table. Hannah's been in love with you for over a year, she said. I looked up. She met my eyes without flinching. And before you panic, I'm not asking for a speech. I just need to know if my daughter just humiliated herself in front of someone who wasn't supposed to hear it. I wrapped my hands around the hot mug, feeling the warmth but not really registering it. No, I said quietly. You should be worried that I've been trying just as hard not to say the same thing to her. Diane closed her eyes and let out a long, relieved breath. Thank God. I gave a helpless little laugh. How long have you known? She took a sip of her tea, looking at me like the question was almost too easy. Blake, I'm her mother. I know what my daughter looks like when she's trying not to love a man, and I know what a man looks like when he keeps showing up for her like it's instinct. I didn't have a defense because she was right. Diane continued, softer now. She's dated handsome men, funny men, men with good jobs and expensive shoes who still don't know how to hold a woman's heart gently. And after every single one, she says some version of the same thing. I stopped breathing. She says, I know it's not fair, but he's not Blake. The words hung in the kitchen for a long time. Diane set her mug down, her expression turning serious. Tomorrow morning she's going to wake up, remember pieces of tonight, panic, and try to turn everything into a joke. She'll laugh and say she was too drunk and tell you to forget it. She looked at me steadily. If you don't feel the same, let her do that. But if you do, don't leave her alone with the worst version of what she said tonight. I stood up before I even realized I was moving. Diane raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? Upstairs, to check on her. She gave me a knowing look. I said morning. I glanced toward the hallway. But if she wakes up in the middle of the night and thinks I left because of what she said... Diane studied me for a few seconds. Then she pointed down the hall. Living room, 2 doors down from hers, sleep there. Let her see you're still here in the morning. I looked at her, trying and failing to hide how fast my heart was beating. She had just given me permission to stay, and I knew, deep in my chest, that nothing between Hannah and me was ever going to be the same after tonight. I lay on the living room couch without sleeping. Of course I didn't sleep. I was still fully dressed, only my shoes off. The room was quiet, curtains half drawn, the faint orange glow from the streetlight stretching across the ceiling. I stared at it and let 6 years of memories with Hannah play through my head like a reel I'd watched too many times. Hannah bringing soup when I had the flu, then yelling at my microwave like it had personally offended her. Hannah falling asleep in my passenger seat after a terrible day, her fingers curled around my sleeve like she needed proof I was still there. Hannah calling me at midnight just to ask if she was too difficult to love. Hannah going on dates with other men while I pretended to be the mature best friend who could handle it. I used to think that was growth. Now it just felt like cowardice. A little after 2 in the morning, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway, then a quiet knock. I sat up immediately. When I opened the door, Hannah was standing there. She wore an oversized sleep shirt, hair messy, face pale from the alcohol wearing off. But her eyes were clear now, only the raw panic of someone who had just remembered she said too much. We looked at each other for a long second. Then she spoke, voice almost desperate. Please tell me I didn't confess my entire romantic history in front of you and let my mother be the witness. I looked at her, unsure how to soften it. She closed her eyes like she already knew the answer. Oh God, I did. Hannah. She covered her face with both hands, voice thick with embarrassment. No, just let me die quietly. She took a shaky breath and kept going. I remember pieces. Jason, the car. You helping me upstairs. Then me saying something that, if the universe had any mercy, should have been erased from both our memories. I stepped out into the hallway and closed the living room door behind me so we wouldn't wake the house. You said a few things, I said gently. She groaned. That is not a humane answer. I stood in front of her, keeping enough distance that she wouldn't feel cornered. You don't need to be embarrassed. I was drunk, she said, voice hoarse. Yeah. Drunk people say stupid things. They do, I answered. But they don't always lie. She dropped her hands and looked at me. That was the moment I saw it clearly, what she was actually afraid of. Not that she had told me she loved me, but that I would pity her. That I would be so kind it would feel cruel. That I would say, let's just forget this, and call it protecting our friendship. She whispered, did I ruin us? Every safe answer disappeared. No. She stared at me, not believing it yet. You didn't ruin anything, I said. You just said the part we've both been pretending wasn't there. She stayed still. Hope flickered across her face, but it was cautious, like someone afraid to open the door too fast in case no one was standing on the other side. Blake, I was drunk. You were drunk, I said, but you were also honest. A small, broken laugh escaped her, half embarrassment, half disbelief. That doesn't help my dignity at all. I'm not trying to save your dignity. She looked at me, eyes still red. Then what are you trying to save? I took one small step closer. You. She went quiet. The version of you that woke up 10 minutes ago and convinced herself I left because I didn't know how to handle what you said. Her eyes widened. Because I was right. I looked at her and spoke clearly. Hannah, I stayed. She glanced toward the living room door, then back at me. You stayed? Yeah. Why? I didn't try to make it pretty. Because I knew if you woke up and didn't see me, you'd turn this into something smaller than it actually is. She looked at me for a long time. Then her voice cracked. That's a really rude way of knowing me too well. I smiled faintly. I've had 6 years of practice. She laughed softly, but the laugh faded quickly because the truth was still sitting between us. She took a deep breath. When I said no one's been right since you... I remember. She shook her head. No, let me say it all while I'm sober. Before I lose my nerve again. I nodded. She wrapped her arms around herself, stared at the long rug in the hallway for a while, then spoke. I've tried dating. I really have. I wanted to meet someone stable, someone good. Someone who could make me forget that my standards got completely ruined a long time ago. My chest tightened. She looked up at me, voice trembling now. But every time I went out with someone, I ended up comparing. Not because they were bad. A lot of them weren't. But they weren't the person I want to call when something good happens. They weren't the person I reach for when I'm scared. They weren't the person who makes me feel like I can take the armor off. She stopped, like she needed every ounce of courage for the last part. And that's not fair to them. It's not fair to me either. But I didn't know what to do with the fact that the person I actually want has been standing right in front of me the whole time. I didn't move. If I touched her right then, I was afraid I'd rush everything. So I just said, I think I've loved you for so long it started to feel like a normal part of my life. And because it felt normal, I convinced myself it wasn't a problem. Her eyes filled again. I told myself I was being mature every time you went on a date. I stood there, listened to you talk about other men, pretended to be the good best friend, and hated every second of it while calling it kindness. She laughed through her tears. That is a terrible strategy. I know. Really stupid. I know that too. She took one step closer. So now what? I wanted to kiss her. God, I wanted to. But I wanted something else more. For both of us to wake up tomorrow without wondering if this only happened because of wine, Jason, a bad party, and a weak moment at 2 in the morning. So I said, "Now I ask you out properly." She blinked. "Ask me out?" "Yeah, tomorrow night, dinner, on purpose. No engagement parties, no alcohol, no Jason, and no your mom as a witness unless we actually need one." She smiled for the first time since she knocked on my door. That sentence is perfect in the most annoying way. "I've had 6 years to prepare." She looked at me, voice soft and a little scolding. "You should have been faster." I nodded. "Noted." She held out her hand. Not because she was drunk, not because she was unsteady, not to stop me from leaving. She was simply choosing to hold my hand. I laced my fingers through hers. The hallway seemed to exhale. She looked down at our joined hands, then up at me. "My mom is going to be unbearable," she whispered. I smiled. "Your mom already claimed the right to be unbearable." She laughed quietly. "She earned it." We stood there smiling like idiots, trying not to wake the house. Then Hannah rose onto her toes and kissed my cheek. A quick, warm, completely sober kiss. She whispered near my ear, "That was the preview while sober." Then she turned and walked back to her room, leaving me standing in the hallway with my heart hammering and the ghost of her hand still in mine. The next evening, I pulled up in front of Hannah's house at exactly 7. I had changed my shirt 3 times before leaving. In the end, I settled on a gray sweater under a dark jacket, nice enough to show I cared, casual enough that I didn't look like I was trying too hard, which I absolutely was. The front door opened before I even reached the porch, but it wasn't Hannah. It was Diane. She looked me up and down, then turned her head and called into the house, "Hannah, the man has finally wised up and arrived." I froze on the walkway. From somewhere inside, Hannah yelled, "Mom!" Diane turned back to me completely unapologetic. "Am I wrong?" I cleared my throat. "No, ma'am, but you're very accurate." She smiled, pleased with herself. "I like accurate." Hannah appeared behind her mother wearing jeans and a soft cream sweater, hair loose, no fancy dress, no heavy makeup, just Hannah. And somehow that made my chest feel tighter than it had the night before. Diane kissed her daughter's cheek, then looked at me. "Bring my girl home with a smile." "I'll do my best." "Better than your best," Diane said, dead serious. Hannah grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the car before her mother could say anything else that would make both of us combust. We drove to a small Italian place about 20 minutes away. Warm lighting, the smell of fresh bread, quiet enough that we could actually hear each other. For the first few minutes, we were both strangely awkward. It was ridiculous. We had eaten together hundreds of times, but this was the first time we were calling it what it was. A date. Hannah turned her water glass slowly between her fingers. "This feels weird," she said. "Yeah, but not bad." "No." She tilted her head, studying me. "Are you nervous?" "Extremely." She laughed, soft and genuine. "Thank you for being honest." I shrugged, trying to sound normal. "New system. Say the truth before I can turn it into something calmer." Her eyes softened. "I like this system. We talked about Jason one last time." Hannah admitted she never really loved him. She had just liked the feeling of being pursued, of being chosen. When he showed up with someone else, what hurt most wasn't losing him. It was the reminder that she could be set aside so easily. I looked at her across the table. "I hated that you ever thought you were replaceable." She held my gaze for a long moment. "Do you know how hard it is for someone to make another person feel kept?" I didn't answer right away. She continued, quieter now. "That's why I was scared. Because if we try this and it breaks, I don't just lose a boyfriend. I lose the person who's always been there." I placed my hand on the table between us. "Then we go slow." She looked at my hand, then at me. "How slow?" "Slow enough that we don't break what we already have. Real enough that we stop pretending." She laid her hand over mine. "I can do that." After dinner, we walked along the river. The night was cold, streetlights reflecting on the dark water. Hannah told me her mother had known for over a year. Not just that she loved me, but that she deliberately mentioned my name less when she talked about her day, afraid she was being too obvious. I told her I had spent just as much time trying not to ask too many questions about the men she dated, because every detail felt like I was cutting into something I had never allowed myself to claim. She looked down at the sidewalk and said, "We really are two idiots." "Yeah, but at least we're persistent." I laughed. She did too. When I dropped her off, the living room light was still on. I was certain Diane was sitting behind the curtains, pretending not to watch. Hannah saw it too. "She's in there, isn't she?" "Definitely." Hannah shook her head. "She's the worst. She's effective." Hannah laughed, then turned to me. The air in the car shifted. She spoke softly. "Can I kiss you? For real this time. Not the preview." I didn't answer with words. I leaned in and kissed her. Our first real kiss, both of us sober, both of us choosing it, wasn't rushed or desperate. It was careful. Warm. Like two people finally opening a door they had stood in front of for too long. When we pulled apart, Hannah smiled. "Yeah," she whispered. "Definitely no one's been right since you." I laughed quietly. "Please stop using your own line to kill me." She rested her forehead against mine. Too late. Inside the house, the living room light flicked off. Hannah closed her eyes. "My mom really can't handle this." I smiled against her hair. She just sent the end of program signal. We stood there a little longer, neither of us in a hurry to move. Something between us had shifted, quietly but permanently. We weren't just best friends anymore. We were something new. Something we had both been too afraid to name until now. And for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't scared of what came next. I was ready for it. 3 months after Rachel's engagement party, Hannah and I were sitting in the same cafe where she once stole my power outlet. She rested her chin on her hand and looked at me like she was thinking something dangerous. "I just realized something," she said. "Should I be worried?" "Maybe." I set my coffee down. "All right, hit me." She studied me for a long moment, then spoke. "Before, I only called you when things were bad. When I needed someone to drive me home, to listen, to help me put myself back together. But I don't want you to be the person I only reach for when I'm falling apart." I answered without hesitation. "You've never been broken to me." She smiled, eyes soft. "I know, but I want you in the good days too. The boring ones. Grocery shopping. Arguing over curtain colors. Eating dinner when nothing special happened. Sitting next to me when I don't have a crisis to justify needing you." I looked at her for a long time, then I said, "I want that too." She grinned. "So, Saturday we're going plant shopping." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a big relationship step." "Very big," she said seriously. "If you pick an ugly plant, I'll judge our entire future." I exhaled. "No pressure? You'll survive." And just like that, we started building something new. Not a fairy tale. Not constant, dramatic kisses in the rain. The best parts were the ordinary ones. Her leaving a sweater at my place. Me keeping a toothbrush at hers. She still stole fries off my plate like always, except now I had the right to pull the plate away and kiss her hand in retaliation. I still drove her home to her parents' house, but Diane no longer pretended she didn't know. One Sunday evening, we had dinner at the Bennett house. Her dad was grilling in the backyard. Diane set a big bowl of salad on the table, looked at the two of us sitting side by side, and spoke with deep satisfaction. "Finally, this house feels less tense now that you two stopped pretending you're just friends." Hannah turned bright red. "Mom, can you please not?" "No," Diane said immediately. "I've been quiet for over a year. I've used up my quota." I laughed. Hannah kicked me under the table. "Don't encourage her." "I'm scared of her," I whispered. Hannah nodded, completely serious. "Smart." That night when we left, Hannah stood on the front porch for a moment. The air was cold, but she didn't move toward the car. She looked at me and asked, "Do you remember that night? The night you got drunk and destroyed all our denial plans?" She smiled. "Yeah, that night. I remember." She looked down at her hands, then spoke quietly. "I was so scared." "I know. Not because I thought you didn't love me. I think some part of me already knew. I was scared you'd choose silence to protect us. And then we'd just keep being friends. Keep standing next to each other. Keep hurting in a very polite way." I looked at her. I was scared of that too. She stepped closer and slipped her hand into mine. Thank you for staying. I squeezed her fingers. Thank you for knocking on my door at 2 in the morning. She laughed softly. I was half drunk, half sober, and fully mortified. Extremely effective. She laughed again, then rested her head on my shoulder. A year later, Rachel got married. Hannah wore a soft blue dress. I wore the suit she picked out for me. Jason was there too, with someone new. This time, when he looked our way, Hannah didn't tense up. She simply reached under the table, took my hand, and kept smiling at Rachel's story. After the reception, we stepped outside for air. Hannah stood under the string lights in the garden and looked at me. You know, she said, I used to think loving the right person would feel like lightning. Very loud, very obvious, impossible to miss. What do you think now? She smiled and something in her eyes settled. Now I think sometimes it feels more like having someone who always shows up. For so long that you start to think it's normal. Until one day you realize, no, it's not normal, it's love. I pulled her closer. Are you trying to make me cry at someone else's wedding? She looked at me, a little mischievous. Possibly. I shook my head. Very rude. She answered without missing a beat. You love me, though. I looked at her under the lights, and for the first time I didn't want to hide behind a joke. Yeah, I said. I do. It was the first time I said those words out loud when she was completely sober, completely steady, and looking at me like everything had finally landed in the right place. Hannah's eyes shone. I love you too. Then she kissed me. Neither of us needed a terrible ex, a bad party, a drunken night, or a mother who couldn't keep secrets anymore to finally tell the truth. But if anyone ever asks where it all began, I'll remember it clearly. It started the night I drove my drunk best friend home. Her mother opened the door, looked at me with the eyes of someone who had known the truth for a long time and whispered, "The girl only talks about you." And it turned out the thing that changed my life wasn't a perfect confession. It was the fact that I stayed long enough to hear it when both of us were finally sober,